This is Cheryl Jennings in the Channel 7 newsroom. President Clinton and Vice President Al Gore have now arrived at the Sunnyvale Community Center, where they will be meeting with city workers. Channel 7's Anna Garcia is live in Sunnyvale with the president. Anna?
Here they are. You can see the president right ahead and the vice president making the way into this circle. The people who are gathered here, there are about 80 people. They are people who have gone through the NOVA training program. They are people who run companies, who have hired people who have gone through this training program. It's a program that's been around here for about 10 years. You can see now that the president is shaking hands and the vice president is shaking hands. It's a program that's been around for 10 years, and what it does is it takes federal dollars. It has a $9 million budget, combines that with local money, business money, and trains people, especially people who have been left behind by technology.
Thank you.
In fact, Vice President Gore is speaking right now.
I'm going to say a few words and then introduce the president. Now, I want to start, though, by thanking Mayor Patricia Castillo for an outstanding introduction. We really appreciate that, and appreciate your warm support also, dating back some time. And my compliments to everybody who works for Sunnyvale. This is such a terrific example of how to reinvent government so it works better and costs less. Sunnyvale is leading the way. I want to acknowledge Tom Lewcock, who is the city manager. I don't see him way in back there. And I want to also congratulate your predecessors as city manager and mayor, respectively, and all of the members of the city council here. This experiment has been going on for some time. I mean, you've learned as you have worked together, and you've innovated as you've encountered new challenges. And also the Board of Supervisors here in Sunnyvale, really this is an inspiring tribute to what men and women can do when they really put their minds to it. I want to acknowledge some very good friends of the president and me who are here. Representative Anna Eshoo, who is right here, and please stand up, Anna. Right. Representative Norm Mineta, longtime friend, outstanding public servant. Secretary of State March Fong Yu, thank you for being with us, Madam Secretary. Controller Gray Davis, thank you for coming, Gray. We appreciate you being here. I'm going to introduce the Secretary of Labor, Bob Reich, in just a moment, but I will save that introduction. Let me acknowledge two other members of the President's administration who are here. The Deputy Secretary of Commerce, who is, along with Secretary Ron Brown, coordinating our high technology policy, is actually from Silicon Valley. Dave Barham, the Deputy Secretary of Commerce, traveled out here with us from right here in this part of California. And another Californian from Orange County down south, who is now the head of the General Services Administration and is a veteran of high technology business here in California. He was CEO of Western Digital, and he has been one of my principal allies in putting together this national performance review, and I'm so glad the president persuaded him to cross from the private sector to come and join the administration, and even to cross party lines also. Roger Johnson, where is Roger? He's the head of the GSA. Well, he was on the tour with us, but he's probably hard at work there. Let me say a few words before introducing the president. We are here as part of our efforts to reinvent government. We want to create a federal government that works better and costs less. And Sunnyvale has provided some of the best examples of how we can do that. Here in Sunnyvale, the satisfaction of the citizenry with the quality of government services has risen steadily as the cost of providing those services has declined steadily. You were able to do that by measuring performance and concentrating on results instead of just looking at the inputs. You got rid of the top-down, bureaucratic, centralized, hierarchical approach, and instead you worked with your employees, empowered them with flexibility, encouraged them to innovate, and then held them strictly accountable for the results that they produce every year. You rely on performance contracts with each key person in the administration of this government. And you let them tell you what they need in order to perform as you'd like them to. And then you negotiate on the basis of how much do you want and how much are you willing to pay for it. And you squeeze the waste out of it, and you get rid of the inefficiency. It is high time that the federal government did exactly the same thing. And that's what we're determined to do in Bill Clinton's administration. We want to create a federal government that does indeed work better and cost less. We also want to start by reinventing the way the federal government creates jobs and helps train people to get good jobs. And we took the example of the NOVA program here in Sunnyvale and in the surrounding area as the model for reinventing jobs programs in the federal government. We're creating, with this National Performance Review, at the urging of President Clinton and behind his leadership, a one-stop shopping approach to job training. And we're using the same kind of approach that NOVA has used here. And the President and I had the opportunity earlier to see firsthand exactly how that approach works. And after the President speaks, we're going to have an opportunity to hear a little bit about it from those who have benefited directly and personally from the approach that we're now going to take nationwide. But ladies and gentlemen, the reason we're reinventing government, the reason we're concentrating on creating jobs here in California and all across this country is because Bill Clinton was elected to bring change to America and put our country back to work and reinvigorate our economy and give us a government that works better and costs less. And he's the reason that we're taking this new approach. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you now the President of the United States, Bill Clinton.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Please sit down. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President and Madam Mayor and ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today. And we want to spend most of our time listening to you, but I'd like to take just a few minutes to explain what it is we're trying to do with this Reinventing Government project and how it relates to the future of the California economy and the ability of this state to come back. When I ran for president, it was apparent to me that America had not done very well in dealing with all these terrific challenges and changes that are sweeping through our world. And you know from your own personal life, when you're confronted with a change and a challenge, you basically have two options. You can kind of hunker down and deny it and pretend it's not there and hope it'll go away. And about one time in 100 it'll work out all right, and the other 99 times it's not a very satisfactory response. Or you can take a deep breath and embrace the change and determine to make something good happen. And that's what we have to do as a country. We have to make change our friend again and not our enemy. Of all the states in America, the state that's had the toughest time lately is California. Your unemployment rate's about 3% higher than the national average. Because you had 21% of the country's defense budget, you've taken the lion's share of the defense cuts, not only in base closings, but costing even more jobs, I would argue, contract cutbacks, which have affected people in this part of the state in particular. And you've had a lot of other manufacturing job losses and other problems. And as a result of that, there have been other kinds of pressures forcing the society apart when we need to be coming together. Now, I believe that in order to remedy that, there are a number of things we have to do. We know we've got, as the Vice President and I always talk about all the deficits we have. We know we've got a budget deficit, but if you know anybody who's out of work, you know we've also got an investment deficit. And the government has a performance deficit, which means we've got a trust deficit with the people. That is, people want me to do things all the time, but they're not sure they trust the federal government to do it, whatever it is, because people have worried so long. So what I would say to you is that if you just look at it from the point of view of California, there are certain policies we need to change if we're going to generate more jobs and bring people together. We know that. We have an economic program, for example, that gives people big capital gains incentives now to invest in new high-tech companies, like those that have generated so many jobs here. We have some changes in our economic program which will encourage other kinds of investments that will create jobs here. We've got a new defense conversion program, and this is an amazing story, where we put out bids on about $475 million of matching funds for people who had ideas to convert from defense technologies or convert businesses to domestic technologies. We received 2,800 proposals of a total of $8.5 billion, and 1/4 of them came from California. Now, the interesting thing is 1/4 of all the unemployed people in America today live in California. All right? What does that tell you? That says there's a big mismatch. You got all these people with ideas and brains and new technologies and ways to create jobs who are trying to close that gap. So just in the last 24 hours, we have reached agreement with the United States Congress to put another $300 million into this program because the demand was so much greater than the supply. It's great. Now, so there's the policy aspect. Then there's the whole idea about how we from the top down can cut through the bureaucracy. One of the things that I did when I became president was to decide I needed to put one of my cabinet members in charge of devising a strategy for California. And I asked the Secretary of Commerce, Ron Brown, to do it, and now thankfully he's got a deputy secretary who's from Silicon Valley, which won't hurt him any in making good decisions. And so we thought a lot about what can we do for California. For example, by the end of the month, we're going to announce a new policy that we probably would not have done this fast if it hadn't been for the demands of the people right here in Silicon Valley to change some of the old Cold War rules that keep a lot of our high-tech companies from selling products overseas to countries that used to be our enemies but aren't anymore. So we did that. But we found over and over again that even if we had good policies, and even if we tried to go around our own bureaucracy, until we made a commitment to make this government work better, which means do more, cost less, and both are important, we can never really serve you as we ought to. And let me just mention that the one specific thing that I want to talk about, I have been just overwhelmed by the work that's been done here in Sunnyvale, basically to continuously provide more services at lower cost. But I want to talk just a minute about this job training issue. You told me you've been on the job for 2 years, and you explained how your company closed down and moved to another state. That is unfortunately going to become a more typical experience for people. The average 18-year-old will now change jobs about 8 times in a lifetime, which means job security does not necessarily mean having the same employer. What it means is having the ability to always get a job as good or better than the one you've got today, which means that we have to make a commitment to the lifetime education and training of everybody in our country. And people in our country have to make a commitment to being willing to have that lifetime education and training into their 50s, into their 60s, as long as they're in the workforce. Because nobody can repeal all these sweeping changes that are going on. We're either going to face them and try to make the most of them, or hope they'll go away. And like I said, that only works about 1 in 100 times. Now, here's the problem. Your federal government is not organized to help you very well. The NOVA program works because it is not like the way the federal government set the job training program up. It works in spite of the fact that it gets federal money, not because of it. Right? I mean, that's what you need to know. It works in spite of the fact that it gets federal money. Here's how the job training program of your country is organized, right? There are 14 departments spending $24 billion a year on job training, which is a pretty good chunk of money, and 150 separate programs. Now, if you're unemployed and you need a new training program, you don't give a rip which one of those 150 programs you fit into. And a lot of people fall between the cracks. The Vice President uncovered this incredible story of a person who was working for a company, and he lost the job that he had because of foreign trade, lower cost competition from overseas. So he took another job with the same company instead of just quitting, you know, and going on unemployment. And then he lost that job because the defense budget was cut. At the time, there was a program to retrain people who lost their jobs for foreign trade, but not to retrain people who lost their jobs because of defense cuts. So the poor guy was punished for going back to work by losing funds to get his training. That's crazy. So what we're going to try to do through the Secretary of Labor, he'll say more about that later, is to merge the unemployment system and the job training system, determine immediately who's not likely to get that job back or one just like it, and give you access to all the training opportunities that the federal government is funding. It is crazy. You're paying for this out of your pocket. I mean, you're paying for $24 billion worth of training, and I'm sure that there's not a person here who could name 10, much less 150, of the separate training programs available. Am I right? Not only that, you shouldn't have to know that. It is irrelevant. So the reason we came here is because this NOVA program is what we want to do all across the country. Yes, we want to make the government cost less, but if it doesn't work better, you still don't get what you need. And the people who are training and work in this fine company that we just toured are examples of what we want to provide for the whole country. And I thank you for spending a little time with us today. Thank you.
When we began the effort to reinvent government, the President called 2 cabinet meetings where this was the principal topic of discussion and invited each member of the cabinet to offer ideas and suggestions and asked all members of the cabinet to participate actively in this 6-month national performance review. No member of the cabinet was more energetic or imaginative in working closely with our national performance team than the Secretary of Labor, well known for his creativity and energy and expertise on job training and job creation. He really took some dramatic steps that are included in the National Performance Review and that we're going to talk about here today. And it's my pleasure to introduce now the Secretary of Labor, Bob Reich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. President, I was asked to be short, which I thought was an unnecessary request, actually. Sunnyvale, we love you, and we are going to try to clone what you are doing on job training and many other things that you're doing. Particularly the weather. We're going to try to clone that. I don't know whether we can do that.
Reinvent the weather.
Can we reinvent the weather? I don't know. I just have a question for you, and we're here to learn. I'm certainly here to learn. We're going to try to create a set of job training programs and integrate the unemployment insurance system. By the way, the unemployment insurance system was designed for what is called cyclical unemployment. Just when you follow the business cycle, you have a recession, and then you get your old job back again. But most people are not getting their old jobs back again. We need a re-employment insurance system. And I just was curious. I want to ask you a question. Just put up your hands, and I want to ask the people who are behind the cameras. You put up your hands too if you feel that if it's a yes to this question. How many of you feel that you are secure in your jobs? Put up your hand. Huh? What a sorry, pathetic group of people this is. Well, you sort of proved my point, and that is exactly the President's point. We are living in a very different era now, and we do have to ease the transition from job to job. It's not cyclical unemployment. It really is people are going to have to deal with structural unemployment, changes in entire industries. It's not just defense conversion, it's international trade, it's technological change, it's affecting all of us. And there's nothing that anybody should feel ashamed of about losing a job. It's natural. It's inevitable. One of the problems these days is people lose a job and they think it's their fault. It's not your fault. It's change. And we want a system that's easy to use, like the NOVA system. A lot of people, you've told me today, that, in fact, a lot of employers come to me, they say they've come to Nova. They've come to Nova. It's a wonderful system for getting training. You put together all of these little separate job training pieces. You created real possibilities for people with jobs at the end. And again, I want to congratulate all of you. I want to find out how you did it. And we're going to ask an awful lot of questions of you. But good luck to you in the future, and we're going to be there trying to duplicate your successes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and that's a pretty good segue to Mike Curran, who is the director of the NOVA program. Tell us